Joining us now is Senator Mark Warner, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. He also serves on the Budget and Finance Committees. So, Senator Warner, if there's a standoff here, what do you think of Senator Graham saying that the border, which has been a problem for a long time, is more important than getting the money to Ukraine?
Well, Andrea, you laid out with your previous guest, the congressman, none of these preconditions were put under Donald Trump. None of these were ever scored in the past, and we're talking not just Ukraine but also Israel, and the necessary humanitarian aid, or you will have countries in the Middle East collapse. And the remarkable thing is, at the end of the day, history will judge whether America meets its commitments or not. The Ukrainians, in 21 months, without the loss of a single American soldier or NATO soldier, have cut Russia's military capacity in half. Anyone who says this is so much bigger than Ukraine, why would any nation ever trust us again? Why would anybody in NATO ever trust us again? Well, Ukraine is not a NATO nation, all of NATO, and we led NATO into helping protect Ukraine. And those colleagues that say, well, we don't care about Putin winning, but we're concerned about China, if you don't understand that Putin win in Ukraine gives Xi more power and his aspirations in Asia, then you flunk geopolitics 101. But we are where we are, Andrea. And listen, the border is a challenge. It's a mess. The president, in his initial proposal, put in $14 billion, never that much money on border. If there are policy changes, and I'm all for policy changes, what I'm not for, though, is the old Republican bill was called H.R. 2, which basically did things on the border in terms of shutting down immigration at a level that even Donald Trump, at his worst, didn't suggest. So, reasonable people, let's put something together. Let's put it on the floor. Chances are it'll have to lose some Democratic votes. I think in many ways that may be more important than the substance, because so many of my colleagues, and I'm not an expert on the border as well, but so many of my colleagues don't understand the substance on how all of these laws interconnect. But boy, oh boy, we should not leave for Christmas holidays without getting this done. I think the ramifications of failure will be historically negative.
Can Senator Schumer keep the Senate in session during the holiday?
Listen, we are hired to do our country's business. Now, again, people may say, I live close, I happen to be the Virginia senator, so let me put that out for my colleagues, say easy for you, Warner. But I can't think of an issue, almost since I've been in the Senate, that has longer, long-term ramifications. Do we want some level of settlement at some point between Ukraine and Russia? Absolutely, but the idea that we would cut and run at this moment, after we've been promising the Ukrainians that we'll be there, and so many of the senators who are now hedging, go back and look at their earlier comments. They were right there with Ukraine, promising we will stand with you as long as it takes for you to be successful. And then the change of position at this moment in time, it's a problem. Listen, but we are where we are. I'm not going to sit here and point fingers. I think the president ought to engage with Leader McConnell on moving this forward. I think we were pretty close a week ago. Literally a week ago, 12 Democratic senators said the border changes that were being proposed they might not be able to support. So there's already pushback on the Democratic side. I think we're going to have to probably have enough policy changes that will lose Democratic votes, but that's how you get to a bipartisan solution.
So you really need to see the president being more involved.
The president's people have been involved in the background, but somehow we've got to break this logjam. I have a lot of faith in the existing negotiators, but they've had weeks on end. At some point, we've got to have something that my Republican friends feel is good enough. And if they don't know the details, one of the signs may be loss of Democratic votes. The irony, Andrea, and you know this, the people who are crying and screaming oftentimes the loudest on the border are never going to vote for Ukraine no matter what we do. There's at least a third of the Republicans in the House and maybe 20 in the Senate that you could shut down the border forever. They still will not support Ukraine. So let's get the group of doable senators. And if the president needs to lead, And I think bringing this with Leader McConnell has been a stalwart supporter of Ukraine. It's now time for all of us who believe this is a historic choice we have to make literally in the next 15 plus days. Let's all not only put our money where our mouth is, but let's stay here as long as it takes to get this done.
We've got about a minute left, but there's a story that just broke today. The United Kingdom saying that Russia's intelligence service, the FSB, as you know, used a cyber hacking campaign to target high-profile politicians, civil servants, journalists. The UK believes this is part of a plan to interfere in British politics. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction is I'm not surprised at all. The Russian services are trying to penetrate the UK. They're trying to penetrate the United States. The Russian disinformation campaign trying to undermine American support for Ukraine is vibrant, real, happening every day. And Andrew, the remarkable thing is that, particularly in terms of disinformation, many of the tools that were even set up under the Trump administration to try to reach out to social media companies to take down disinformation and call it out. There was a recent court case that the Fifth Circuit said basically nobody in government can even talk to social media. That makes no sense at all. We are potentially going into the 2024 election cycle. Unless we can get that overturned, and frankly, the administration needs to lean in a little bit more, where we could be flying blind in terms of not only Russian interference, whether it's through cyber attacks or the cyber we can still deal with partially, but in terms of mis and disinformation and other nation states, we've got to engage with social media to make sure that Americans can at least be aware. And as we've talked in the past, that challenge goes up exponentially with artificial intelligence tools.